Good evening and welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting, the virtual meeting. We're back to Zoom. We did do a hybrid meeting the last time. So this is our City Council meeting for Tuesday, July 28th. And nice to have you with us. Those of you who are watching at home are on YouTube. And at this point, Dee, let's take roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Mayor Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Chapman.
Present.
Councilmember McCall.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Records.
Here.
Councilmember Sorensen.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
Under announcements tonight, we'd like to remind everyone that we're still not doing very well with the census. And if you haven't filled out the census yet, please go online to 2020census.gov. Fill it out. As far as Pullman's concerned right now, we're at 56.4%. Whitman County at 58.3%. We've got a lot of people in the county that's been doing it. And again, it is so important for the entire nation to do the census report. It determines the members of the House of Representatives. It determines if you're a nonprofit, it depends on a number of grants that you possibly could get. So if you still would have some time, please do it. Go on to 2020census.gov. Other announcements, we'd like to let you know that Stuff the Bus is going on. It's going virtual, just like a lot of other things right now. It helps the Pullman School District. So before August 14th, if you can make a monetary donation to help, just go to KiwanisClubofPullman.org, Stuff the Bus. And this is the 12th annual Stuff the Bus for the Kiwanis Club. Pullman's Farmers Market, open every Wednesday, 3:30 to 6:30, the Brailsford WSU Visitor Center. Music on Main's been canceled because of the latest governor's dictate in terms of no live concerts outside. Also, please remember to wear your masks and just think of others. And it's so important right now. I just saw the latest release from the Whitman County Public Health. We've had 2 more positive that tested. We now are up to 84 in Whitman County. The 2 that came in today were males, one between 0 and 19, the other between 40 and 59. And again, please wear your mask, socially distance. It will all help everyone. This past Sunday was the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disability Act. And so we issued a proclamation as mayor to refer to it as the 20th Century Emancipation Proclamation for People with Disabilities. It was passed 30 years ago on July 26, 1990. And whereas the city of Pullman affirms the ADA goal of equality and opportunity, full participation, economic self-sufficiency, and independence for persons with disability. And whereas every person in the United States, not just people with disabilities, benefits from covered entities adopting principles of universal design with respect to buildings, modes of transportation, websites, and other technology procured and used by covered entities. I therefore, Glenn Johnson, the mayor of the city of Pullman, do hereby proclaim in memory of the 50th anniversary of Americans with Disability Act. And as a young man watching my father who had polio try and maneuver without ADA, and seeing how he was treated, trying to find parking spaces, trying to get to different places. The ADA Act has just been fantastic for this country. We still got some room to go. I just also want to thank Dan Records for the work you're doing on the WSU campus and being a great expert in the American with Disabilities Act, that we can consult with you from time to time. Dan, you've just done a great job with that. For Pullman, we've all benefited from that as well. So I just want to thank you. I don't know if there's something you would like to add to it, but the ADA Act, it's 30 years old. It just seems like it should have been more than that, considering what people have had to suffer through before that act was passed and signed by George H.W. Bush.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. I would just say that, as you said, it's done a lot of things to transform kind of how people with disabilities interact with essential services, with governments, with places of public accommodations, but there's still room for growth. And I would just ask that anybody who is in a position to be a gatekeeper, somebody who can make decisions about, how a person, how everybody interacts with a business or interacts with a government agency. Just keep an open mind about the different things that people have to encounter and overcome to be able to just receive basic services, and being flexible goes a long way.
Thanks, Dan. Next item is item number C, a confirmation of appointment. We're appointing R.J. Lott as our new planning director, replacing Pete Dickinson after Pete was here for 36 years. I can say that we had a great committee that listened to about, I think, 5 or 6. We had a number of candidates, and many of them were qualified. We actually brought out 2 to come to Pullman so we could at least meet them, talk to them. We had a number of people, toured them around the city. We had a chance to listen to their ideas, and that's why we are now recommending R.J. Lott to be the new planning director for the city of Pullman. He comes to us from the Wenatchee area. He's been working with the county right now. He's had city experience, and just a joy to work with, and I think he'll be just great for everybody to work with. So at this point, do I hear a motion to confirm the appointment of R.J. Lott as our new planning director?
Move to approve RJ for planning director.
Okay.
Second.
Moving second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. And RJ appreciates that. He'll be starting about the end of August. He has just a little bit more to finish off with his another master's degree. So he'll be doing that. Item number D is the financial update for the second quarter of 2020. And with that, Mike Urban.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening again, Council. I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you and the viewing public, and we will work through this once again. Bear with me. Select a window, slideshow. Okay, can everybody see the PowerPoint okay?
At this point, it's black. There it is.
Okay. And I'm in City Hall instead of at home today, so it's technology's catching up with me a little bit. So again, good evening, and as I like to do when I'm normally presenting in person to everybody, I like to be able to take questions as we go, and of course, I struggle with that a little bit since we're on a Zoom meeting. So at the end of each slide, I will pause and ask for any questions like I normally do. Just jump in because I can only see 4 or 5 people here at a time. So with that, I'm going to jump into the slides, but just a word of caution as we go forward. When you're looking at the each slide and you're looking at these drops and rises and they look steep or gradual, just make sure you're please looking at the axis and see how Excel treated everything in PowerPoint when we got going that way. So that's why I've included the numbers at the bottom as well. So with that, I'm ready to move on. Are there any questions on this? All right. Next slide. There it is. Okay. So first up is usual, our general fund revenue. The budget was $23,349,000, and we did adopt almost $16.5 million in reserves to balance the 2020 budget. So through the second quarter, you can see our difference between this time last year. It's up about $650,000, and of that $650,000, a lot of that can be attributed to this GMET grant, which is the Ground Emergency Transportation Grant. This is money that was routed through us federally through the state to help with the fire transports that we do for patients. So this is outside of what we've been seeing, and at one time additional boost in our revenues. And then because council also likes to keep track of how our liquor and marijuana is doing, through the second quarter, those collections are up $49,266, so about 22%. So that's an overview of the general fund revenues as a whole. Are there any questions on this one?
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
It's Al.
Hi.
So you say liquor and marijuana are up. What is our total for the year?
Stand by. I have that in my set asides here in case it came up. And I just gotta find them because they aggregate with everything. Contribution. Let me take the staple out. That was a tactical error. Intergovernmental. Well, they gotta be in here. Let me see what happened here. Maybe I got a page flipped around. 356, okay. Yep, I got a page flipped around. Here we go. Okay, so marijuana collections through the year to end of second quarter are $32,959.52. Liquor excise tax is $99,141.31. And liquor board profits is $138,710.75.
Great, thank you for that. And then one other thing before we go off this slide. So it appears to me that if I'm looking at this correctly, we'd almost be exactly equal to where we were at last year without the GEMT grant and the uptick of about 50 grand from liquor and marijuana. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, fairly close. We've had some ups in some other items, and then we've had some downs in certain items, most notably revenues from parks and recreation and charges for services that we've curtailed operations on.
Okay, thank you.
Mike,
Yes.
this is Dan. With the liquor and marijuana, did you notice a trend? Is that increase after kind of WSU went to all online last spring for second quarter here? Is that what we're talking about?
I can tell you really the increase is fairly flat on the marijuana and fairly flat on the profits from the liquor board. It's the liquor excise tax that's really moving it. So the actual sales. I saw that tick up in the second quarter, and everything was still fairly even in the first quarter. And we only
Right,
get reporting on it, monthly. So wasn't any real spikes, just a gradual climb.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good questions. Anyone else? Next slide. All right. Let's get into some of the specifics here. Sales tax revenue. This is the most volatile revenue source that we have as a city. That's why I started reporting on it when I arrived here in town a little over a year ago, and try to keep council up to date on all of this. I expect the May collections to be available by the end of the week, and you'll get my usual email on that with some more analysis next week when we can actually download the items and see where the revenue is coming in or not coming in. Just a reminder to the group, we were down 20% in April. April was hopefully the bottom of everything. We'll see how that plays out with the economy as it's presented to us today. But April was, everything was shut down. Students were gone. We lost Mom's Weekend. That was kind of the low point, and I'm hoping May improves. And to that point, we're just seeing May now here as July ends, and we're just starting to realize the effects of these economic slowdown. Whether it's the collection on sales tax. I know when we get to the unemployment part of the discussion, the extra $600 a week goes away here at the end of the week, and what or if that's going to be replaced with and how much of that played into our economy is certainly something to consider when people have disposable cash to spend on whatever they're spending it on. So that's my view on sales tax. Does anybody have any questions on this one?
Quick one here. So if I'm looking at this again correctly, we're not really too far off from where we were at a year ago. Am I reading that right?
You are.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Even with the 20% down. And part of that was, I expected March to be March's collections to be a little bit worse than they were, but we were buoyed by some last minute construction where everybody was trying to get some stuff done before the construction trade got shut down. So when you get all those materials delivered into Pullman, we can collect some sales tax there. And a lot of these contractors also, get paid on a cash basis. So when they get paid by their their employer or whoever's asked them to do the construction for them, then they're reporting the sales tax for the things that qualify for that.
Okay, the point I'm kind of trying to look at here is, yeah, you show 20% down in April, but if you look at the big picture, we're not as bad as I thought we might be compared to last year. So thank you.
Yeah, and to that point, I agree with that sentiment, because when I saw the March numbers, I was pretty surprised that we did as well as we did, and the April numbers were a little bit better than I had anticipated. So more news on May as it becomes available. Okay, so next slide. Here's our property tax revenue. And, after my April, oh my, what's going on, the May and June collections kind of closed the gap a little bit. So that was a pleasant surprise over the last couple of collection periods. And, the collections they spike. They certainly spike. For April, reported the first part of May, and then October reported the first part of November, because that's when everybody's paying their property tax. There's a slow trickle in as the year goes on, but I don't expect this to move a whole lot in the next quarter as well. But, we were looking at, 9 to 10% projected below rate, but everything kind of came back just a little bit. And that includes the fact that we have a few people that are on payment plans with the county treasurer. And if you look at its totality, great, we're up about $47,000, but we also raised the property tax 1%. So it's hanging in there. I'm a little less concerned about this than I was the last time we discussed. And as long as unemployment remains low and people are making their tax payments, and we can fulfill our bond obligations at the end of the year and all of that, I'm feeling pretty okay about where property taxes stand right now. Are there any questions on this slide before I go to the next one? Okay. Okay, private utility revenues. This is one I've added back in because it is a significant dollar amount. These are our gas, electric, telephone, garbage, all those things that are non-city owned, that there's a utility tax that we collect and get paid on. So if you look at this graph, again, it continues to increase. Although natural gas was down quite significantly over the same period, probably attributable to campus being closed and not heating the buildings during the colder part of the year. Electricity and garbage certainly is up, and if the fans in my house being on this week has anything to do with it, it'll probably be up again. And as you all know, the telephones just continue to tick down and down and down as people abandon their landlines. So this continues to be a good earner for us. Natural gas is certainly down. It had been up over budget in the past year, and I talked to council about increasing our revenue item to handle that. We're hanging in there as far as what was previously budgeted, but beforehand it was always outpacing the budget. So when I see 44% down, I think there's an explanation for it, and my concern is just the population not being on campus. Any questions on the private utility revenues?
I do.
Yes.
So quick question for you. So telephone, is that only Verizon or whoever they are owned by now, or does this include other entities?
It includes other entities. And are you thinking of Frontier?
Well, I'll give you a prime example, Spectrum. provides landlines. You can bundle it with your service. You can do landlines, you can get cell phones and everything else. I don't know if the other carriers are doing that, but it's a, it's a line into the house. It's not a cell phone. They actually do landline through their cable. Would that be considered part of this utility revenue?
Cable would be considered separate. So since the telephone part is going through a cable, it comes through a different agreement with a different revenue source.
So do they report that to us then, or do we have to talk to them? I mean,
Yeah, cable reports to us through a franchise agreement, tracked separately.
all right, thank you.
Okay, this item here is our city-owned utility funds. This is our water, stormwater, and such. Just a reminder to the listening audience too, the council did approve a payment plan for individuals affected by COVID-19 that is up on our website. We have inserts going out into our next two billings to look at people's, give people the opportunity to sign up and bring their bills into current. The thing I want to point out about this item is there's a timing item, and that's our WSU utility payment. When you stop stop reporting at the end of June, if a utility payment shows up in July, or in June when it usually shows up in July, we got this little spike here, and that's kind of what happened with the WSU payment. We typically receive that in the third quarter. So next report, this is going to even itself out a little bit. It's not a trend. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention on that. Okay. Any questions on the city-owned utility revenues? Okay. Building permit revenues, a good indicator of what future activity is coming our way. I do know there's a backlog of some items upstairs to not being able to go out and do the work when construction was shut down. Items involved in the Planning Commission and holding public hearings on certain items. We do have, thank you for approving RJ, as soon as we can get him in here and he can start working through the flow of it too. And Jennifer can go back to her usual work, but she's hanging in there and keeping the planning department under control until RJ's in here as a warm body. So as you can see, it's been pretty level the previous 3 years, but we certainly had a drop off for the expected reasons here. And as the economy recoils, if it stays in a certain spot, we're going to watch this one very carefully because it does indicate the future development and possible sales tax on delivery of goods into Pullman for construction. Any question on building permits? Okay, outstanding. Streets and arterial street revenue. A lot of this is funded by the private utility revenue and the streets fund. You'll see it's up $114,000 in spite of the fact that real estate excise tax was down $34,000. There was a period where home sales, people couldn't show homes, and even now that we're able to work through some of that, they're facing some backlogs and bottlenecks with things like appraisals and inspections. So I know the property, a real estate community is working really hard to continue this engine going so they can keep doing this. And I've seen some sales starting to happen through here as well. So I expect this to continue its uptick. One of the other components of the revenue that comes through here is the fuel tax. And I'm driving less, and I know other people are driving less. So I'm not sure why the fuel tax is up. I've chased a few theories on it, and I'm still kind of scratching my head, but that's something I want to kind of get to the bottom of so I can satisfy my own curiosity. So when I have some sort of answer, I'll be sure to email the council on that.
Mike, this is Dan. Do you think that could possibly be that people are sticking closer to home instead of, taking longer trips and fueling up elsewhere? They're taking the opportunity to fill up it in Pullman.
I think there's a certain amount to that. I just also think that if we're staying here, but I still think we're driving less. I do see some more activity on the roads on the weekends, of course, but yeah, 16,000 is a lot for a difference in fuel tax and how many gallons that equates to. So I'm working through it.
Mike, I was on a call with the Washington Economic Recovery Coalition, mostly West Siders, and we had a person on from WashDOT saying that on the west side in the Puget Sound, they were looking at the freeways at about 85% of what is normal. They actually saw an increase. But again, like we've read, a lot of different companies now are saying, hey, I think you can do this by Zoom or at home, and you don't have to be on the freeway. But they did show an increase, at least in the Puget Sound area, back to about 85% of what normal traffic is like on the west side.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor. All right. Next slide. Okay, transit revenues. The curtailed operations have a lot to do with this, of course. One of the things that helps with the curtailed operations is the FTA grant that Wayne Thompson is working through. This grant is a lot more available to substitute for different things. Although it cannot replace lost revenues, it certainly can replace a lot more expenses than the CARES Act is allowed to. So we're using this to stabilize a lot of the regular operational items. But yeah, Pullman School District, when they closed in-person school at the end of last year, we returned some dollars to them. And same with WSU, because council just heard these items at the end of last month and gave Wayne Thompson his direction on that. And now we know that Pullman School District will be announcing something week after next as far as what their plans are going to be. And WSU is it's quite well known that they're going to be online for the foreseeable future. So we're going to monitor this really carefully and make sure we can stretch those FTA dollars to maintain our basic operations. Okay, any questions on transit?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about the refunds here a little bit. The refund requests from WSU and all that, now they're going to go online. So we're anticipating there being fewer students in town. But this bus system is dependent upon those funds coming from the university. So I hope that there's some really good negotiating and thinking and that type of thing going on to when refund requests are coming in.
Right. And this is something that I have talked to the mayor and the city administrator, as well as Wayne in transit and Kevin Gardis in public works, as when they ask us for refunds and where are those dollars going, and change in billing services, because these aren't being done, that we do have an operation to continue because WSU isn't the only user of it. And when we're limiting the amount of people that can be on buses due to social distancing and those types of items, trying to bring everything into context.
Mike. Yeah, I say this, as somebody who works at WSU and fully supported. There are a lot of WSU operations that have to continue, and WSU has said these operations have to continue, including the Student Recreation Center, and a lot of those fees continued to be assessed towards students because their operations had to continue. Things had to be paid for, and so I just want to make sure that that's fair and equitable all the way around. So I guess take that for what it's worth.
So Mike, and this is Nathan Weller. And maybe this is something Glenn and Adam can kind of jump in on. I had some questions regarding transit. I don't want to go out on a limb here, but I will. I've seen a lot of the buses driving around, front to end, with maybe one person on the bus. And there's two buses, one following another. And with COVID still going on, are there maybe some savings? I don't want to, well, I am suggesting something, but maybe this is something Glenn or Adam can jump in on, because we're going to need to look at some savings with transit.
Sure, I can help. Transit's funding source is one of the most diverse that we have, and it's not something that I see as being wildly impacted just yet. And they're trying to do their part with the social distancing requirements to really manage the number of people that go on the buses. There's some timing issues where the buses can get back to back like that, but there's also a chance that to change the routes and to diminish the number of drivers and things like that, I don't think that it's going to be a drastic savings. You've got the dollars are tied up in the buses themselves. We've been really fortunate to receive the CARES dollars that are specific for bus operations. That's really kept us going. It's helped us be able to purchase a couple extra buses, so that if we need to put them into the fleet for students, if they come back in the springtime, we have them available to, again, keep the small number of riders that are allowed on each bus. Mike, did I miss something there for covering the dollar side of it?
No, 100%.
Glenn?
The other thing we could add too is that Wayne Thompson has told us that a 40-foot bus with social distancing can only take 10 people right now. And so they've been trying to do that. And anytime a regular bus operates, dial-a-ride must operate as well. So they're trying to work it out. They're going through looking at schedules right now. They had to wait until they find out from WSU. There'll be some adjustments, but there are students here on campus, and there are graduate students on campus. And there's still people, as Brandon pointed out, they're going to the rec center, and WSU is collecting those funds. And as far as I've read, they're not refunding those funds. So,
okay. Well, I think, the entire council and staff know I'm supportive of the transit. When I've been out watching the buses while I'm walking my dog, I just see one bus following another bus, maybe one or two people in there. And if we're looking at pinching pennies, I'm just saying, but I'm totally supportive of the transit. So just wanted to point that out and had that question. Thanks.
Yeah, and because those dollars are outside of the general fund, it doesn't really help for the general operations costs as well. So, and Mike, as he's going through, can kind of hit on that on the expenditure side too.
I think, Eileen, I might have saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you. It seems to me that with something like a bus system, that's like the blood that courses through the body, and to shut it down is almost more damaging than it would be to keep it going the way it is. And Pullman is Pullman, and one of our highlights of our community is our wonderful bus service. So for the 3 or 4 or 5 months, maybe more, that we're going to be in this circumstance, boy, I think keeping that bus system is going, because that's one of our highlights. Keep that bus system the way it is.
Well, I just want to mention real quick, I didn't say shut down any bus. It's looking at adjusting routes, scheduling differences. It's not, I never said shutting down a bus. And
and believe me, they are adjusting routes. They have a lot to work on and try and figure out what they can do. And they did mention to us, I think, at council, that they're going to try and have like that half-hour rotation. If the students were back, they were then going to have several buses, because again, with only 10 people on a bus, on a 40-foot bus, they've got to figure out. Well, they're working their way through it right now. That's a process that's well underway.
All right, good discussion on transit. Let's go to the next slide. Civic Improvement Fund. Yes, this is an item that council keeps a very close eye on as well. So I want to make sure I continue to report on this. This is the Hotel Motel taxes that come through and what we pay to the Chamber for Tourism and the different events that we have. And you can certainly see that with Mom's Weekend, graduation, like a couple of the hotels not being able to be occupied, the summer events being down, it is trending down in a way that we would expect. Last month's hotel motel tax was $4,000 when normally this time of year it's 30,000 or more. So it's taken a significant hit with the Blues Summer Series not being able to run in its full operations and things like that. So that's it on civic improvement. Any questions on this one?
Yeah, Mike, real quick. So with the hotel motel tax, where is that? Can you go back real quick?
That's part of that's the revenues that come in on this one.
Okay. Now, has there been any taxes from the COVID? I know CAC has put aside some hotels for COVID isolation. Is that taxed? Is that what's the situation with that?
So I think what you're asking me, forgive me if I get you wrong, Councilman, is that when CAC or even one of our firefighters are quarantined into a hotel, is that pay tax into the hotel motel tax?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike, hey, it's Brandon. Yeah, I would not wish to not have the Palouse Summer Series. That's been fantastic, but we're also not, we're not reimbursing any costs for things like that. So it's not a lot that we're receiving, but I would imagine that this is still growing. It's just not growing as much, right? Because we're not spending anything.
Right. So the revenues do continue to go in, and the expenses continue to remain lower because there wasn't a 4th of July. There was, but there wasn't a 4th of July celebration. Lentil Fest has been postponed to next year at its normal time, and those types of operational items have been curtailed. Okay. Good. Okay, let's move on past the Civic Improvement Fund, and let's talk about the general fund expenses now. So, yep, everything I have is on here. So you can see that expenses are trending a little bit lower. And one of the biggest changes I've mentioned to council in the past is that we postponed all of our interfund transfers out of the general fund to their different landing zones to maintain the general fund balance through these lean times until we can figure out exactly where we are. That amounts to about $1.3 million worth of items. So typically when this happens every June and every November to reconcile everything. So the June payments would have happened in the second quarter. And so these would be things like the finance department's interfund expense to IT for, being one of our utilities, those types of things. And, if you remember, our 3 interfunds are the building fund, equipment rental fund, and IT. So we've just put a pause on these things to keep the balance sheet stronger in the general fund, and it makes it weaker in the interfund items, but that's something we plan on addressing by the end of the year as we see what happens here. We continue to make payroll. We continue to buy all ordinary and necessary items in those 3 interfunds, and operations continue to move on. So this is the general fund expenses as a whole. Any questions on this before we get into the departments?
Mike, this is Dan. So what we're looking at here, if you had done those interfund transfers, though, we would have been looking at a slight increase over last year. Is that correct?
It is. And when we added that $1.6 million into the expenses for the budget for 2020, so we would be higher than last year, but still down against the budget.
Okay.
And some of that too can be explained by, bargain contracts, increase in benefits, those types of items. But as we get into some of the departments, I think we can have some of that discussion as well.
All right, thank you.
Got it. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the first general fund bucket, and that's the legislative expense. These items, really the difference between last year and this year, there was a timing issue, but the other big difference is the Whitman County Auditor's invoice. We did see an increase over the prior year. Some of that has to do with voter registration costs. A lot of it has to do with the election costs. So really everything continues to be fairly level in that item, but the Whitman County Auditor is what moved that. And I think everybody remembers my email when that came out earlier in the quarter. Okay, questions on legislative? Okay, the next one is Finance Administration Wing, and as you can see, that is up quite significantly, but a lot of that is attributed to the CIP costs that are going into the City Hall construction, live in these funds, and to the tune of $425,000 to date has come out of there. So you add that with our increase in liability insurance that happened in 2020, and then we do have an additional accountant in my department. So if you pull out the CIP, that brings things down a lot more to last year's numbers. Any questions on this one? Okay. Law enforcement expenses, you can see, is down most significantly, delaying the interfund items in between for June, but the police department has decreased their overtime by $76,000 over the same period last year. So they're minding their items very carefully, and we continue to see good progress in there. Okay, any questions on law enforcement?
Yeah, Mike, just a quick comment. I'd like to thank Gary for working that and keeping that overtime down. Thank you, Gary.
Right, let's move on to fire and ambulance services. Very similar discussion here. The interfunds have saved us $433,000 in the delay, and Chief Heston has controlled his overtime too, and it's down $65,000 over the same period last year as well.
So I would be remiss if I didn't thank Chief Heston also for working on the overtime. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Hal. Okay, the next grouping, Community and Economic Development Group. This would be protective inspections, planning, and economic development. $53,000 did not go through interfund in June like it normally would. Things continue to show an upwards trend, and that's really because we didn't have an economic development department this time last year. And there was also one open position in the inspections group that remained open all of last year, and it was just filled in right at the end of 2020 Q1. So there's some payroll items, and I know those folks have been awfully busy when we shut down for the no construction. When that reopened, they were busy. They were doing, I think, 30 to 50 inspections a day. They were hopping. So this is a very busy department, and we hope it stays busy because that means that there's some other revenues coming behind us. Any questions on this group? Okay. Library expenses. $99,000 of their decrease is attributable to delaying the interfund. The rest is just really curtailed operations. They did have a major roofing project. Some of the expenses were realized in the second quarter, but most of them are going to roll through at the beginning of the third quarter just due to the timing of the billing. So the roof has been completed, and that was a fairly large project. So at the end of the third quarter, this will be a very interesting one to look at. Any questions on the library? Okay. Okay. Parks and Rec, a lot of the same story you've been hearing. The 288 is attributable to delaying the interfund items. They do have a significant foot in the government buildings due to all the different places that are touched here. But recreation certainly had significant curtailed operations due to COVID because we weren't able to do the classes or the preschool and those types of items. Okay. Any questions on rec? Al?
Quick question. So with them moving over into at least the recreation department into the new city hall, are we still paying rent or to the school district from where they were at?
No, we have extracted ourselves from the Pioneer Center and turned that back over to the school district so they can do their upgrades and start utilizing that on their own.
Okay, so we've got a little savings there that we're not paying to the school district and included in the, okay.
And with that, that's the end of the general fund type expenses. We're going to move into the more specialty funds here as we go. We're getting there, folks, I promise. So streets and arterial street expenses, you can see that that is up a little bit, and that's basically due to their contributions towards the new city hall construction. Yep, there it is. So they have their increased expenditures, and this is also a good time to remind council, remember a couple of weeks ago when we had to not approve the 2020 overlays project, and we're going to bring that back in 21. Normally these expenses would live here, so at the end of the year it's going to look a little skewed compared to what we would normally do, and then we're working on I don't want to say doubling up, but certainly making up for 2020 and 21 as well as revenues dictate that.
So Mike, real quick. So is this also reflective of the trial run we have going on in downtown?
You know, Nathan, there was very little expenses put into that other than bodies that went and helped set it up. There's a little bit of paint. This is a very low cost trial. All the barriers are owned by the city or the airport. So I think there might be some dollars attributed to this. And at the end of the day, we can certainly reconcile the costs. I know the signs didn't appear until the third quarter because of for billing at least, whether they're placed in the second quarter, but the billing didn't happen until the third quarter. And the signs wouldn't move the needle on this when you're looking at $947,000 because they were only a couple $100.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Okay, good questions. More on streets, arterial streets. Okay. Utilities, city-owned utility expenses, very, very much at par. We did delay some interfunds because they do have some expenses to like ERD for their equipment. You see the big spike in 2019. That was no, that wasn't. We had some very large capital projects that got billed out in the second quarter in 2019, and the capital projects expenses are certainly looped into the utilities because they're utility capital projects. So a little bit of an outlier. And yeah. Any questions on this one? Okay, I promise we are getting close. I think there's 3 more slides. Okay, transit expenses, little discussion from the revenue to carry over there. $715,000 have been delayed due to the interfund. They have the buses that they pay the amortization rates to ERD on as well. And that FTA grant, I'm just so impressed by how wide open it is to be able to use for different assistance for both operating and for capital. So Wayne Thompson's been managing that, so he keeps us up to date, and we have a couple extra years to spend that. We're supposed to spend our CARES grant by the end of October. I believe Wayne's got until 2013 to stretch these funds out. Okay. Any questions on transit expenses?
Can you say that year again? How long he has to spend it?
23, not 13. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I think.
Did I say 2023?
No, you said 2013.
Oh, yeah.
Just
That's a,
clarifying. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
no time machines available still. So yes, 2023. I apologize. Okay. Okay, and here's the internal service funds. This is, again, government buildings, IT, equipment rental. $75,000 worth of savings by delaying because they still have some interfund costs amongst themselves. You'll see that really large spike in 2018. That's when we purchased the new City Hall facility. So that's what you see going on there. But they continue to keep operations going. We don't want to delay a whole bunch of repairs and maintenance because that'll just cost us more at the end. So they're being very judicious about what needs to be done and managing our costs very carefully. And they do have a portion of City Hall expenses that they work on because the IT department does live here and they are going into City Hall. So that's why you see a little bit of a pop from last year.
Mike,
Yes.
this is Dan. Are there some of those types of repair expenses on the new City Hall that are going to be taken care of with CARES Act dollars?
I would very much like to. I'm very, very careful with how we do that. We did have another webinar from Commerce yesterday with kind of an update, and they looped in the state auditor as well. And they talked about the type of things that they'll be looking at and the type of things that people will be doing. 3 different cities, University Place, Bremerton, and Spokane Valley's mayors all spoke as to what type of things they're funding with that. I have some fancy plans, and I'm putting that together in the form of a memo to bring to council at the next meeting, as per my previous memo with the update, as to talk about some of the CARES dollars and some of the things that we would like to do to recover those dollars to help stabilize our budget. And there's an item in the new City Hall that certainly qualifies for that, and that's the roof repairs in the rec center, because that area does act as our emergency shelter. We put the generators in for that, and all of you remember as we were taking the tour of that early on, all the 5-gallon buckets laying around catching water. The last thing we want to do is in an emergency situation where we may have to put people on ventilators in there. It needs to be a dry and sterile environment, and catching water isn't going to be the answer.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right. Any questions on the internal service funds before we go into the last slide and we talk about the economic outlook and some of the other things? All right. So today's final thoughts. So first of all, we're having follow-up budget meetings with our groups on the 4th and the 6th next week to talk about where they are on their actual budgets, because as we see the savings trickle in, some things we see the savings on right away because we're postponing a capital item. Some things are slow and methodical, like when we're curtailing the overtime, because we see that pay period over pay period. So as the departments are looking to put together their budgets for 21-22, they're also looking at 2020 and see how they're going to come in and what type of savings to our reserve we can put back. So that's what we're talking to them about. We gave them some extra time for this so they can be well prepared. All right, economic outlook. This is when I jump on my crystal ball, and I got a call from one of you council folks last week and asked me on Friday if I'd thrown away my projections after WSU said that they're going to go online, and the answer was yes. I spent a lot of time over the weekend and Monday kind of refining everything. So again, my usual caveat on this is probably by the time I'm done speaking, this it's going to be obsolete because things are changing so quickly. We have another round of funding being considered at the federal level. We have all sorts of other movement going on, but as of today, here's my narrow view of the world. So first and foremost, WSU being online, it really caused me pause as to what that's going to look like. I really don't think we can look back at April as a way to extrapolate out on that, because sure, we missed Mom's weekend and there's graduation in May, but not having the students in and doing the dollars. But at the same time, I'm driving around town and I see an awful lot of students in town already. We're hearing from some landlords that some folks are interested in breaking their lease, and then we also hear from other ones that they're still full. So I'm going to be monitoring this very, very closely, of course, because they're a huge economic driver for us. But you know, we got football weekends. We're still not 100% sure what's going to happen on those and what the attendance is going to be. Dad's weekend is always a big one for us in the fall. So WSU is certainly on my mind. Looking at the unemployment rates, the national rate's 11.1%. The state rate is 9.8%. And these were the rates published for June just last week. Whitman County is the lowest unemployment rate in the state of Washington at 6.1% for now. I think it's a testament to what we're trying to do here as a group and continue to move things on, not just the university, but SEL, Pullman Regional, and the city. All the employers trying to keep staff employed during these tough times. I did mention earlier that one of the things that certainly weighs on me is the $600 a week at the end of the week that goes away on the unemployment and how that's going to affect the velocity of money. And we're just really unclear on how that's going to be replaced. The inflation rate is currently 0.6%. April's drop was the largest month drop since December of 2008, and we all remembered what happened after that. So certainly keeping our eye on that. Low inflation is certainly good for right now when we're trying to stretch every dollar, but the next update is the 12th of August, so I'm going to keep my eye on that. Gross domestic product nationally in the first quarter was down 5%. The next release of that is going to be on Thursday, and the Atlanta Fed's already predicting that's going to be 52% down. And that's going to have long-term lingering effects for us as things catch up, because if we're not producing or spending, and it'll hit eventually. To what degree, we're going to keep our eye on. So at the end of the day, the talking heads that I listen to on TV and in the media, they think things will level off later in 2022. So they're still talking short-lived, but there's still between here and there some bridges to cross. As the mayor mentioned earlier, our COVID cases are up to 84. I kind of looked back a month ago and they were 36. So as we start to see some of this, we just want to be really careful that this isn't a trend, that it's still one or two here or there in every case, and we want everybody to stay home and stay healthy and everybody to recover. But it struck me, and I thought that was worth mentioning to the group, because it's something I'm considering in the more global discussion, because as we go into the winter, when it's actually cold and flu season, and we'll be able to social distance more being inside since we're not out, but I'm already a little predisposed to get sniffly in the winter as well. So ultimately, conditions do remain volatile, and there's more to come. My position and my responsibility to you in this community is to certainly be physically responsible, but my nature also predisposes me to take a more enhanced view, to be even more cautious when I'm forecasting. So I'm still looking at a 12 to 15% drop by the end of the year. And again, as we just start to see these first few months trickle in, we have March, we have April, we're about to get May, and we can start putting together what this actually means. I hope I'm on the low end of that. I was lower before WSU made their announcement, but I think it's prudent to think a little bit more in this range now. Although there are more, and the drop is led significantly by the revenues that I'm worried about in sales tax, certainly admissions tax, fees for services, as we discussed in rec, library, and the pool, investment interest, because the investments, the state pool went down significantly because there was the interest rate cuts at the federal level, and state and federal grants, because so much of the efforts being put into other grants like the CARES, that some of the usual grants that we rely on have kind of fallen by the wayside. We hope they continue to fund them, and we continue to apply for as much money as we can. And with that, the CARES Act dollars, again, I'm going to bring that forward, but I also think it's kind of my responsibility to continue to make council aware and the community as well that I need to point out the fact that the state of Washington has not contributed anything. We have received no additional help from the state. It's all been from the feds. They're talking about their second set of funding right now, and they're trying to negotiate that. But the whole time we're sitting here, it's been whatever we can do as far as a city to curtail our expenses, hope that the revenues continue to come in and continue to support our local economy. But the state of Washington has not helped us one bit. So I really want to emphasize that to the council. If they have any ability to lean on the state and ask them what they're planning to do to help us. That's a lot. You guys asked some really, really good questions like you usually do. So I want to take any more questions that you may have and continue to make myself available for the anything that may come up in between these meetings.
Nathan, I see you have a question.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Hey, Mike, I had a question, and this may be beyond our ability to track, but given the last stimulus package that Americans received, do we know if any amount of that had a significant impact here locally with sales, or was it a lot of online type of purchases? And following up on that question is, with the expectation of a stimulus package being passed, hopefully, by the federal government, do you expect an impact from that in our local economy?
I believe, and you're right, tracking this and how the dollars come in is a little askew. So most of this is anecdotal, and I can certainly look at some of our online retailers and where the sales tax come in, and online sales have continued to remain strong. What I'm noticing in my household, my neighbors, my friends, is there's been some purchasing here and there on some things when stimulus money came in. It's like, we feel compelled to go buy some gift certificates to support our local restaurants, or, it's been a long, I'll say this because it's been a long time since I got my wife flowers. It's kind of a thing. So I really did, make amends on that. So I felt like I continued to support the local economy in that particular way. Additional dollars coming through here, yeah, absolutely. I think everybody wants to see our local businesses survive. As great as the stimulus is, it's not as great as to seeing everybody back to being healthy and all our businesses being back to full. So the stimulus will help, and I think it'll continue to buoy us at a certain level. It's if it goes away. And if this $600, even though our unemployment rate is low, I know that there's been people getting the extra $600 have not felt like they need to hold on so very tightly, but they are still, watching things in the future. It's very important for them to make ends meet.
Any other questions of Mike? Okay.
Real quick.
Yeah.
I'm having an issue here, Mike, on my computer, I think, but and you cut out when you were saying, did you say that you thought that at the end of this year we would be 12 to 15% down? Is that right?
In revenue.
In revenue.
Yep.
And
as of today.
Okay. And then to piggyback on that, where do you think our expenses will be?
I think they will be down 10 to 12%, if not a little bit more, as we start to meet with some of our department heads and they look at some of their budget savings. We were able to sneak peek a couple departments due to scheduling issues, and they continue to give 10% or more, and that includes doing the interfunds at the end of the year. So if we go and make our interfund groups whole, we're still looking at 10% savings, and without making the interfunds whole and possibly looking at interfund loans, that's another $1.3 million twice. That's $2.6 million we can retain in the general fund budget.
Okay. I just am trying to put this together here a little bit. And, from a few months ago when we heard, oh my gosh, could be the end of the world. If you start looking at this, we're actually not in as dire straits if I'm at this moment. I mean, it's a crystal ball, I get it. But if we're going to be down in revenue 12 to 15, but also down in expenses 10 to 12, it's not a gigantic difference. Am I missing something, or is that kind of an okay way to look at it?
I think it's a very okay way to look at it. And I can tell you from my perspective, when the April sales tax came through, I was closer to 20% because we were looking at that definite lag, which May and June certainly filled the hole on a little bit. Because when we look at our major funds to the general fund, our major revenue sources to the general fund, it's sales tax, property tax right off the bat. And those property taxes are super important to make our bond deal. So as those items came out, I felt like I can taper my concerns down a little bit. And you're absolutely right. When you're looking at a 12 to 15% potential hit in revenues and a 10 to 12, it's a weathering deal. And again, this is a situation I need to continue to monitor. And, maybe to my detriment, I know a lot of my contemporaries around the state won't even go that far as to make these bold predictions, but I look at this and I need to give you guys kind of where I'm at and take the input as well. So you guys can plan for the next several months, and especially since we're going into a budget cycle.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. And I know it's hard for you to come up with these numbers and foresee the future. I'll just add on here. I do think it's super important more than ever now that WSU has gone to online, that we as a city do everything we possibly can to help all of our businesses and all of our people in Pullman as much as possible. And so I think we need to be on that as much as we can. And that's just a little comment out to everybody. So now's the time for us to step up and shine a little bit. And I appreciate your numbers. Thank you very much.
Ann.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to acknowledge, I believe that part of the reason we are in this more positive situation than Mike previously thought, or that we were afraid of that we may be in, is precisely because of his action very, very early on when things started to slow down, shut down. Right back in February and March, he was actively looking at how to curtail budgets and how to shape them differently, working with the department heads. And so as a city, because of his leadership, I believe in that particular case, I think that has really set us much better than many of our peer cities. So I'd like to recognize Mike's work and his vision and his many sleepless nights being concerned about it, but those came to fruition via action, and I appreciate that.
Nathan.
I appreciate it, but I certainly couldn't do it without the leadership of the city and the leadership of the department heads, because we tasked them with looking at their critical operations and asked them to sharpen the pencil. And there was times where we went back and forth, and we got into some very, very good discussions, and everybody to a person rolled up their sleeves and said, "How can I help?"
Okay, Nathan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just want to echo what Ann said. Mike, you've shown great leadership in this. I think you bring up a great point. It is also on departments that they've seen we're all in the same boat. And Councilmember Sorensen brought up a great point that fire and police, and I know all of our other departments are looking at their budgets. And I think as well, Councilmember Sorensen brings up a good point. Supporting our local businesses and the community has really seemed to be brought together, where I see other communities are kind of getting split as time goes on. I feel like our community is coming even closer together. So in any case, thank you all department heads and Mike and the council and community.
Okay.
Any other comments? With that,
Just a
one
quick,
of the things that I do quite frequently is I thank Mike for taking the job here in Pullman, and also Adam Lincoln, because as you know, I've been around here for a while and we've gone through the 2008 recession. We've had other times where we've been hit, and there's a lot of work that's done behind the scenes that you guys never ever see. And when I'm getting emails back and forth 7 days a week from these individuals, when I'm down at City Hall on Sunday and see people that are working at it, I just want to make sure that all of us, and again, I'm glad to hear from the council tonight. Thank from the top on down, from Adam's point, from Mike's point, that leadership, it's been wonderful. And again, I'm very grateful they took the jobs here. You're going to also, I think, find that kind of positive atmosphere from RJ Lott when he starts on in planning as well. And all the department heads have really stepped up. And again, we say it now because next week we start more budget hearings again. So with that, we'll move on to item E, which is the consent agenda. These items are considered routine in nature. Council's had a chance to look at these ahead of time. Do I hear a motion to read by title only?
So moved.
Second.
Moving second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? With that, Laura McAloon, our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Your consent agenda consists of a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the regular meeting of July 14, 2020, and approve them as submitted. A motion to approve payroll disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 100463 through 100480, electronic transfers numbered 616, 618, 619, 621, 622, 623, and direct deposits numbered 62518 through 62798, totaling $1,173,537.71. A motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 100481 through 100549, totaling $982,291.46. A motion to approve a mutual aid agreement between the City of Lewiston and the City of Pullman. And resolution number R-49-20, a resolution authorizing the acceptance of state capital grant number PTD 0199 for Pullman Transit.
Is there any item the council would like out for discussion? Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 6. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Our first item, and the only item on the regular agenda tonight, is a resolution pre-authorizing the acceptance of a U.S. Department of Transportation FAA grant. With that, we have Tony Bean, the Executive Director of the Pullman Moscow Regional Airport, on the line with us. Tony? And I see Tony's there. There he is.
I'm unmuted. Out of there.
Okay, there we go.
Mayor, council, sorry, that's a little bright. So the request is to put in the maximum amount of funding that the FAA, which is $20 million. That's the maximum that is a little bit better. That they can do in that capability. It allows them to, or us to, at least apply for those funds and see if the FAA at the end of their fiscal year has monies that can be allocated towards that $20 million ask. We may get 5, it may be 10, but it allows for funds to be available if we have an application and we can accept those funds. So the resolution pre-authorizes the mayor and the finance director to accept those funds. The match would come from the CARES funds the airport already has in place. And it would get us quite a ways on the discretionary list by just being in the queue and having a application ready. That way the FAA gets to the end of the year, and this has happened a couple of times. We've done this a couple of different times with the runway. Is if the FAA has year-end money, we want to be able to accept that money with the need, and so that's the request.
Any questions off Tony on that one? As you well know, Tony has been very good about getting these grant applications in there. And this will also help us towards our terminal project as well. And Tony, you might just give them an update of that you got some Boeing money here just recently from Boeing Field that I know the airport board will be dealing with tomorrow, but might mention that how this process works.
Yeah, so you have a 3-year clock with the FAA on your grant funding. So everybody gets entitlement funds, and if you've got cargo, you get apportionment funds for that. Our entitlement funds annually are $1 million. So annually we receive entitlement funds, and you can use those towards most any project that you want. And then anything above and beyond that is discretionary money. The FAA has a list, and they have prioritization, and they go that route with it. If you don't use your entitlement funds and you hit year 3, they disappear. Or you can trade them to another airport, as is the case with Boeing Field. We're going to go ahead and use their funds this year that are 3 years old, so they don't expire. So it helps the FAA, it helps Boeing Field, it helps us in this case, because there's no cap. The $20 million cap is on discretionary funds. There is no cap on entitlement funds. So instead of $1 million to start design, now we have $2 million to start design. And we can repay Boeing Field back the entitlement funds at such time if they request them in the future. And it doesn't jeopardize our ability in the future with any program that's on our capital improvement project list to get discretionary funds to do that. So it's kind of a trade to make sure that money, that is grant funds that are already significantly in need don't disappear because things happen with projects.
There's no questions. Do I hear a motion on this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
A motion. I heard a second. Was Dan? Did you do the second?
Yeah.
Okay. Laura, would you please read the resolution?
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number R-50-20, a resolution pre-authorizing the acceptance of U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration Airport Improvement Program grant monies for Pullman Wasco Regional Airport projects supporting terminal design and construction.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, motion carries. We now move to new business. Under the Zoom program, we generally try and find out who has new business ahead of time. Al Sorensen notified us that he has some new business, so we'll go to Al right now at this point. Al?
Okay, I know that there might be another public person waiting. Glenn, did you want to maybe have that before mine, or it doesn't matter to me?
I thought we'd do the council and then we'd do the public person.
All right, great. Okay. So I just wanted to bring up here a little bit, a little discussion on the current downtown test pilot project. We have now been in this mode for approximately 6 weeks or so. Kind of got it started about June 15th. And I think it's time for us to kind of evaluate some things a little bit. The point of having these test and pilot programs is so that we can check it out, see how it's going, and make changes if we need to, and that type of thing. And I've had quite a little bit of input from people in town, and I'm sure most of you have, good, bad, and different. But I do have some things here that I'd like to just talk about in regards to the way that it's currently set up. I know that the BDS suggestion from them in regards to the angle parking and the bike lane in downtown Pullman are different than what we set up on the test pilot. the bike lane was supposed to go on the north side of the street, and then therefore the angle parking on the other side, on the south side, was to go all the way back to the curb. I think that we need to think about this a little bit. I do not think that the Jersey barriers are working. I do not think that the bike lane is working. People are hitting the barriers. I was down there this evening about 6 o'clock, and it's definitely not a straight line with the barriers. Vehicles are still sticking out in traffic because they're afraid of hitting the barriers. And there's not enough room for you with the narrowing of the 2 lanes for you to actually back into there without your nose moving into the other lane if you have a larger size vehicle. You get nose sticking out. So my suggestion here is that, and I did a little measuring down there today. If we were to remove the Jersey barriers and remove the bike lane and put it back, not back, put it to what the suggestion was from BDS, I think we would see some improvement in our comments and suggestions from the city. I believe that we would gain in the neighborhood of approximately 8 feet moving back from the Jersey barrier to the sidewalk. Okay. And that does not include 2 to 3 feet more that people are avoiding from hitting the barrier. I mean, we've got, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 feet where cars are sticking out, and it's just not working, in my opinion. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit. And the whole point of this test project was for us to make changes as we go along. And if something's not working, then I think we should think about making changes. So I'd like to just throw that out for a little discussion.
So real quick, the Jersey barriers and Glenn or Adam, anybody Kevin, they were there to protect the bikes. Is that correct? And removing them, sorry, yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Sorry, good evening, everyone. I lost my screen for a second. Yes, the Jersey barriers were there to protect the bike lane. And Councilman Sorensen is right that the bike lane was originally proposed to go on the north side. The reason, I think most of you will remember, the reason we put it on the south side is it was just easier to implement on a trial basis and from a cost standpoint. So, yeah, I think Al brings up some good points. We've certainly learned a lot so far based on what we've seen and the feedback we've gotten from people. I actually watched a full-size pickup yesterday back in perfectly without, on the first go round, next to another car that was there in a parking stall right beside it, and did not have to veer out into the other lane, which is a comment that we get from time to time. So I think part of it is just people getting used to the idea. But I think with the trial, things are probably a bit tighter than they would be with the full-size plan that BDS had presented to us when we have more room to put all these things in. So we're probably a few feet short. The Jersey barrier takes a couple feet out. Having the bike lane on the other side probably gains us a little bit because we can overhang the curb on the south side. So it's just tight in the trial, and it showed up in the comments and the things we've heard from folks in town. So, I think they're all good points, and I think with the, going forward, I think we'll gain that little bit of room back. It'll feel less tight, with the full scale plan in the future, assuming we decide to move forward with it. I would say probably the most angst we've heard, or the thing that's given people the most trouble, is the back end parking. It on paper, it's safer. That's what the studies show. You have to back up, whether you pull in or back in or parallel park, you're gonna have to back at some point. It's just somewhat unconventional, and it's some people adjust to it right away, very quickly, and don't have a problem with it. Others have been struggling with the back end parking.
Nathan, did you have any more questions?
I think just real quick, I think Al brings up a good point. And I know I expressed this before. Some older individuals have expressed that with fused necks or some of the different surgeries that prevent being able to look around as easily as perhaps those that haven't had those surgeries, it does create a bit of quite a problem. And Kevin, I just want to say I appreciate you and the city have been very responsive to the questions and the concerns. I know one was the left hand turn, and you guys definitely moved quickly right away. So it really should be mentioned that during the trial, you've been very, very responsive, and really appreciate that. So that's it. Thank you.
We'll go to Eileen next, and then I see Dan. Okay, Eileen?
Yeah, I think the bike lane really does need to be reconsidered. It doesn't really, it goes from nowhere to nowhere. I'm still seeing people riding bikes on the sidewalk on that side of the street, even though there is a bike lane, which is a little inexplicable. But let's look at that again and maybe think about putting it on that north side. It's not logical. The cross Main Street. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and I think we could gain those few feet that Al referenced. The Jersey barriers do have a big footprint when you get up close to them, and that is taken up, and I realize that we could tighten that up at some point, but I really, really strongly suggest that we reevaluate that bike lane for putting it on the other side of the street. I think it would, I think it's, I don't know, there's a lot to be considered here, but I think we ought to be considerate.
We'll go to the response for Kevin, then we'll go to Dan. Okay.
My response would be that if council feels like the bike lane is problematic or the parking spaces aren't quite deep enough, that we eliminate the bike lane in the trial. Because I think it would be just too difficult to try to implement it on the north side in the trial. We have been collecting data on bikes. We've got a counter out there, so we know how many bicyclists use it, and it's actually more than I expected. It's not a huge number, but it's more than I expected so far. But if council feels like they want to try out the back end parking with longer stalls, I say we remove the Jersey barriers and eliminate the bike lane for the remainder of the trial and not try to put it in on the north side.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, that was actually going to be my suggestion as well. Take it from me, Kevin. But I do know that I think the bike shop has been appreciative of having the bike lane on that side. And I do know that I've seen a lot of people ride their bikes down there to go to the bike shop, and then they're hanging out on the sidewalk with their bike while they wait for Bryce to come out. But I do think that might give us, like Al said, kind of a window of opportunity here during the trial period to see what it's like, the back end parking without the bike lane, without the Jersey barriers, that will allow people kind of to have a little bit more confidence that they're not going to hit something as they back up.
Yeah, we're going to go to Ann Parks next, and then we'll have Pat.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was also concerned about what does the bike lane look if we move it to the north side, which I guess we'll have to think about as a permanent solution eventually. I'm not sure, because I know that was the original design. Is there a way to have the bike lane on the north side up to the last block of Main Street and then maybe take it down around the library? Or I don't know. I'm afraid that our bicyclists will be upset that we're scrapping it for the moment during the trial, but I do also see the value in that just for now.
Kevin, did you want to make any more comment on that before we go to Pat?
Sure. In the master plan, the bike lane goes on the north side of the parallel parking. But the only way we could make it work in the trial is we would have to put it on the south side of parallel parking like you see in some cities. And then I think that's a lot riskier for bicyclists because people open their doors right into the bike lane. And so that's why I'm saying for the trial, maybe we should just, if we concerned with the bike lane on the south side, we should just eliminate it, not try to put it on the north side for the trial.
Okay, Pat Wright.
As you all know, I'm not personally in favor of the back end diagonal parking. But having said that, I have not had one positive comment about it from a variety of different ages and demographics. Safety is, I mean, you're either going to back in one way or you're going to back out another way. And so that really, I'm not convinced on the safety aspect of it. Obviously, we have a lot of time now to do this trial. I don't know that given the condition that we're in with a lower population in town, as well as fewer people actually coming downtown to shop or eat or, whatever one does downtown, that it's not really an adequate time to be evaluating this. So I think we need to extend the trial out further. And then the last comment I have is that I hardly ever see a lot of cars in the diagonal parking. And so my sense is when we implement this further and fully on a permanent standpoint, that we're actually in effect going to be losing parking spaces because people won't be using those diagonal parking issues. So those are my observations, comments, and relaying input that I've received from a variety of different people.
Thank you, Pat. We're going to go to Nathan and then we'll go to Al.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things. I agree with Pat completely. I haven't heard any positives, and I think everybody has seen, especially during the pandemic, it's much more difficult to change people's behaviors once they're used to one way of doing things, to go to completely different. And so back in parking, while it may pencil out, as Kevin said, on paper, changing people's behaviors who are used to going right in, I think it will be very, very difficult for us to accomplish that. The second point that I will make, and I understand the challenge of the bike lane, but I think it is an integral part of the downtown, what we're trying to accomplish downtown, which is a more walkable, bikeable, friendly area. But I have no answer on how to deal with that. I'm just saying that it is an important component, and that's it.
Okay, Al Sorensen. And then we'll go to Brandon.
Okay. Kevin, I got some stuff for you here. So tell me if I'm wrong here, but the BDS plan with the bike lane on North Road, a lane on the outside of the parallel park cars.
I didn't catch much of what you said, Al, but I think you were asking about the bike lane on the BDS plan being on the north side of the parallel parking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I believe that the sidewalk, when it's redone, then has the bike lane elevated and on that sidewalk. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so there would be no reason for us, in my opinion, to put a bike lane on the north side now, when that's not even what it's going to be like in the future anyway. What I'm trying to do here is mimic what we think we might want to do. And if we're just adding stuff to add it, that's not necessarily what we need to be doing. And, I understand that we want, and Nathan, that we want bike people downtown and all that kind of thing. We still have an ordinance that you're not supposed to ride your bike on the sidewalk, but that doesn't happen. They're all riding it on the sidewalk. But when you go downtown and you look at some of this stuff, I personally have witnessed a lot more people testing out their bikes up and down both ways from Bryce's bike shop than I have seen people using it as a commuter lane, because it really doesn't go anywhere. And it's very difficult to get from the south side of the street to the north side if you want to go north on Grant. So my whole point here is to, I believe we should eliminate the bike lane right now for the test period. I don't think we should put it on the north side because it wouldn't be what would be the action anyway. And you're right, people would be opening their car doors if we did it, out there. I do believe that removing the Jersey barriers, removing the bike lane would make it a lot better for the test of the angle parking. And Pat, I'm with you on that. It's all about backing in, backing out, parallel parking's backing. There's people that won't parallel park. If you guys remember, we had the discussion, people will just drive through downtown and will not parallel park. So we're not going to win everybody over here. And that's part of the reason to do the test. And I actually kind of like that we are doing this now, and it can continue this when there's not as many cars, so that people can kind of maybe get used to it or think more about it. I really truly do believe on an engineering side that if we take the current bike lane out and those Jersey barriers, that it will make it easier for people to do this stuff. I'm not saying they're going to like it, but I think it's a really good try. And on another point of this, we're trying to beautify downtown. If any of you believe those Jersey barriers are doing anything to beautify downtown, that is not the case. So it would, again, clean things up. And I think it's a great little move to try for a while. Why not try it? See what all happens. Thank you.
Okay, Brandon, you're next.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I agree with Nathan, and I've been a proponent of having a bike lane since the beginning. This was something to try, right, as a test. And I think it was important to allow that to happen. When I hear the comments, and I've tried to park downtown as well, and I've done it successfully and not successfully both. But there are multiple things that we hear as the reasons of concern. One of which is the angle, one of which is the depth, things like that. By removing the bike lane, at least now, while we're in test phase, we might be able to narrow down some of those complaints, even about the parking, to find out, can people do it if there is more depth, right? Is that the number one concern that they have? If we give them the more depth, do we continue to receive complaints or concerns, or do those start to go away, right? So we can really narrow in on what the real concern is for a lot of people. So I think that would be okay to do that. I mentioned this, and I don't want to get too in the weeds. I actually think we should do a work session on this, but we have to be ready if we eliminate any kind of angle parking at all, for the complaints of not having enough parking downtown, which is one of the things that we hear all the time. So those folks have to be ready to hear that if this isn't what they want to do, if this isn't something that they like, then if we go back to a parallel parking, we're not gonna have as much. So I would like to consider, maybe as part of a trial, some of the other things that would be in the master plan but wouldn't be a huge cost. So we did see in Olson Street where there's one lane in each direction and they added diagonal parking. Maybe that's somewhere where we could do something like that now, and then maybe try the parallel parking back on Main Street. Because we've added parking then somewhere else. We still added it downtown, maybe not on Main Street, but we could add width then. We could add space back to Main Street. I mean, there's a lot of options. I know for protection of bike lanes, if we wanted to go that route, what we have now does take a couple feet. And there are other options that cities are using, and we maybe didn't during the test phase because of cost, right? So I think we need to keep an open mind, but then also recognize that if we're changing things, we need to communicate that this doesn't mean we're getting rid of a bike lane permanently, but I want to narrow down and see what the real concern is of the 2 or 3 that are mentioned by people. Maybe they're all a concern, but they're all varying degrees of concern. And if the number one issue that people are having is the front end of their vehicle might be sticking out, or they feel in any way that they're too close, they feel like they can't back up enough. Maybe we'll know for sure if we take out the bike lane and we stop hearing complaints, right? We'll know whether there's a certain percentage of people that that was really the big issue or the main issue. That's all I have.
Okay, Pat, I see you next.
So in all of this discussion, I haven't heard anybody talk about front end diagonal parking. I don't know why we can't consider that. And certainly it's more of a safety factor if we're thinking about it from a bike lane standpoint, because it's easier to visualize where that bike lane is if you're pulling in rather than backing in. And, that seems to be the biggest concern that people have, is that they just don't have an awareness or a perception of where they're going when they're backing up into a constrained area like that with, number one, a Jersey barrier. Number two, if we remove the Jersey barrier, where is the line of delineation for the bike lane? So I would throw that out as well. I also have heard people complain about not being able to parallel park on the south side of the street. So maybe pull-in diagonal parking could be the best of both worlds to satisfy everybody.
Kevin, you'll make any comments on that compared to the study that I know that we're trying to follow and trying to test? And we did say it's only going to go through September anyway. So, okay, Kevin?
Certainly going to pull in diagonal parking would be an option we could try in a trial. I think my suggestion would be to do this methodically. And so if the real issue with back-end parking is just the size of the stalls and the Jersey barriers, why don't we find out, as Brandon Chapman had suggested? And if we still are getting a lot of grief over that, then maybe we look at restriping it to have pull-in parking. All these changes will have to run by WashDOT since it's a state highway, but that would be my suggestion, is we just do these in kind of small bites, give it a few weeks, see how it goes. And we have time, we have time now. We've got, if this is going to go to the end of September, we've got another 2 months. So we can certainly take our time and try a few of these things out, see if the comments change, and then we can evaluate after that.
I think obviously Public Works would like to have some direction, and I've heard somewhat unanimous opinion, somewhat, I notice that qualifier, to remove the Jersey barriers and just use the backup, try that out, see if that eliminates some of the mistakes or some of the comments. Is that—
Clarify one thing? When I was talking about Olson Street, when I was talking about the angle parking on Olson, I was thinking about having that as a head-in parking, just to see again if all of a sudden we had an exorbitant or disproportional amount of parking that people were going to Olson Street. We could see whether the concern was really backing in also, or the head end. So then we would know that maybe people aren't opposed to walking the one block, but it was more of an actual back in concern about the back end angle. That would be something that we could do, and I don't really think it would cost that much. And to the best of my knowledge, Olson is not a state highway, so we wouldn't need to get special approval for that.
But since we already have approval right now for back end, the barriers, it sounds like, would be one step that we could remove the barriers, so people could back in and they would not be in that lane. Is that what I'm— okay, Al?
Yeah. So I think, Kevin, if I'm hearing you correctly, we kind of do this in steps, and you said methodically. So I think, I still believe that we need to test the back end parking without the barriers and without the bike lane. And I think that's the logical move, in my opinion, for us to test out that back in parking. Now, Brandon, when you talk about Olson Street and pull in versus back out, that might be the place that we need to do that. There's a lot less traffic on those streets, so backing into traffic to leave the space might be the spot to do it. But if you remember, we also talked about doing a lot of other stuff to Olson Street in the BDS plan. So my point here is that I think that when we do test stuff, it needs to be test stuff of what we might do in the future, not just to do it. Does that make sense?
So let's make sure we have some direction here. Is it acceptable to the council on the basis of the discussion tonight to then ask Public Works, when they have time, to remove the Jersey barriers so people can back up? Adam, you have a comment there.
I just want to ask Kevin his thoughts on if we remove wholesale the Jersey barriers, are you concerned about vehicles backing into light poles and trees and taking those out? Because if they're backing into Jersey barriers, I'm not sure they're not going to back into light poles and trees. So is it wiser to keep some Jersey barriers and maybe even at the proper angle of the parking spot, but keep some of them to protect some of the infrastructure that we don't want to see harmed during this trial?
Jumping the curb would be one of them, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's something we would definitely have to look at. I can't say for sure, Adam, whether that would be a problem or not, but it very well could be. And your suggestion would be maybe something we would go back to. If you remember, I think the airport has some smaller Jersey barriers too that are almost like parking bumpers. So, I won't be able to figure it out tonight here on the conference or on the council meeting, but if you let us go down and kind of look at it, I think we can probably come up with a plan if that's what council decides they want to do.
Yeah. Does that sound agreeable?
I'd just like to tell you that you're saying remove the Jersey barriers, but you're not saying remove the bike lane. We have to remove the bike lane also, in my opinion, right, Kevin?
Yes, that's correct.
So the suggestion would be to remove the Jersey barriers and the bike lane.
But have Jersey barriers up if they need to protect the infrastructure. I'm thinking of, we have a number of signals there that if somebody jumps the curb, we certainly don't want to have the same issue that we had obviously at the turning point at Grand and Main, where we've knocked out a signaler twice. So we want to make sure those things are protected.
I think we go, Kevin, like you said, we go down and check it all out, and let Public Works check it out. Because I'll be honest with you, I want as few Jersey barriers and things down there as possible to try to at least dress things back up again. I believe in protecting our property, but it needs to be looked at, because I don't think we really looked at that, Kevin, when we did this, because we never thought about it, right? I mean, It was playing with the barriers. So we now have to think about, is the curb going to stop the back tire of a car before it hits something? So.
Right, and there isn't much curb reveal, if I remember correctly, on Main Street. You know, it might only be a few inches, so it's not like we've got a standard 5.5 or 6 inch curb there.
Yeah.
Okay. So I believe we'll wait for Kevin and they'll take a look, but we're here. Basically, the majority saying, let's remove the bike lane, let's move the Jersey barriers, let's protect the infrastructure, and we'll go from there. Okay, the other new business, Nathan, you said you had something you want to talk about.
And I have something as well.
Okay, Eileen, okay. Nathan?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So over the last couple of weeks, through Poverty Awareness Task Force, few meetings at WSU and discussions with community members, there's been a lot of concerns about response, city response, university response, and unifying those efforts when COVID-19 spikes, which is most likely when some students come back, and then with the upcoming flu season in September, and further. So I did express those concerns to Adam and Glenn, and I think, and Adam, you can jump in here if you want. I would really like to see, some presentation from the university about their plans, and possibly the school about reopening. I know there's a lot of work that's already being done. I had the privilege to sit in on a COVID-19 meeting this morning, which Adam was a part of, Glenn was a part of, many organizations around the region, Whitman County Health, Police Department, Chief Jenkins. So in any case, there is a lot going on out there, and I want the community to know there are plans and there is communication. A lot of this stuff, I think Glenn, Mayor Johnson had already mentioned that much of the planning goes on without all of our knowledge. And that's because there's so many working parts. But I still would like to see presentations from some of the stakeholders in our region, or at least in our community. So that can be expressed to community members and organizations who have those concerns. So that was all I wanted to mention, and thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a good suggestion. I think there are a lot of agencies that are putting together their plans or continuing to evolve their plans. I started to reach out today to our partners and a lot of the stakeholders that you mentioned to arrange for a town hall that we can all get together and have something that's documented, recorded, and put onto YouTube so that it lives on after the fact as well. So that was a good suggestion, and we're working on putting that together. So thank you.
And again, university put on a town hall on Friday, and again, we'll have a town hall. We're working on that together. So Eileen, you had another piece of new business?
Yeah, I was at by telephone. I was at the meeting of the Downtown Association yesterday, and I was more than a bit surprised to hear a fully fleshed presentation of the plan for Pine Street that included commitments from the city in terms of fixtures and furniture and picnic tables and jersey barriers, possible inclusion of the Arts Commission and artwork. And it sounded a lot like this was almost a done deal. And there has been a lot of discussion over the past couple of weeks about potential street mural and some concerns that the street murals being organized by a third party. Well, this Pine Street effort seems to be organized by a third party as well. And I was curious as to why it's not getting the same kind of scrutiny. I realize that the Pine Street, and I support something on Pine Street as part of the BDS plan, but I was really surprised to have this sort of dropped in my lap, complete with drawings and participation of, like I say, city departments. And this is the first, I've heard of it in this form. I don't know why we haven't had a presentation to council about this. I mean, we're going over the minutiae of the angle parking on Main Street. Why haven't we heard anything about what's going on Pine Street other than just sort of, something's in process? Well, it sounds like there's been a lot in process, and I'm curious as to why we haven't heard about it. My impression was that the forklifts were coming in next week and making this happen, and I'm all in favor of making something happen in a hurry. But I also think that if this is being put together by primarily a third party or parties that are working within the city, as we say, behind the scenes, the council needs to be in on this. I think we have all, been very supportive of doing things downtown, but we want to be in on it. We have people to represent, and we want to be able to get input, just as we have on the Main Street project. So what's going on here?
We've had several discussions at council about the parklets and things like that. Adam, do you want to fill in?
Yeah, it's an extension of the conversation that we'd had about parklets. I'd say that once we found that we weren't going to be able to be successful with funding from lodging tax, that we decided that there's certain resources, i.e. the picnic tables and things like that we do have that we can set out down there. The Jersey barriers obviously help provide the protection, and Design West was really generous in donating the quick design that they put together for that. I'd also add that the concept of closing off that part of Pine Street was one that is in the BDS report, as you'd mentioned, council member. And so the thought there was continuing with that if we can kind of do it through donations and make it work as part of the trial that we talked about with council when we had the parklet conversation some weeks ago. We're hopeful that we'll get some other financial resources to make it a little bit more robust than what's there right now in the concept of kind of blocking it off, but that's kind of where we're at right now. Is we're continuing to try and make it successful, and it's in line with what was presented to the council the last time we met on parklets.
We're talking about parklets, and this Pine Street project, as has been pointed out, is not a parklet. This is like a bit of a different animal. I'm all in favor of the parklets. In fact, I was going to bring up tonight the fact that I was hoping that we could encourage our downtown businesses, or any business in Pullman for that matter, to extend themselves out onto the sidewalks, sort of like Crazy Days, or out into their parking lots, and encourage that. And I talked to Mike about maybe doing something about ground lease waivers for the duration, as it were. But I really felt that this had gone a little too far without council input. This thing on Pine Street, yes, indeed, it is in keeping with what we have discussed. But boy, this just arrived pretty much full blown, and it sounded like it was progressing rapidly, which I am, like I say, not necessarily opposed to. But boy, it was happening very fast and without current council input.
Okay, Al, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I became aware of this today also, and I do have, I believe that we need to do something with this. I mean, the Pine Street situation of making it maybe one way and all that, great idea. And I know that we talked about parklets and that kind of thing. But I do have some concern in regards to what it's going to look like. Who's in charge of what it's going to look like? Are we going to follow, if we're going to put more trash cans or more benches or more planter boxes, are they going to fit with what we've already kind of started with some stuff downtown? Or are we going to have a mishmash of whatever? I'm also possibly concerned about paintings or whatever else is going to go on. I think it's a good idea, and I think we're all thinking about good ideas down there. And I do believe, making an extension of the Pine Street Mall to the other side of the street between Main and Paradise is a really good idea. But I do think that we need to have some pretty good input on this, and it needs to match and it needs to go along with kind of what we're thinking about doing. I'm just backing that up a little bit with Eileen here that, just to do it isn't the right idea. Let's do it to what we think it might be something in the future. If it's a test, why test something we're not going to do?
Sure. I'd recommend shelving it then, because there's no way that there's the budget set aside to do much more than what's proposed right now. It is pretty bare bones. It is pretty basic, and there's certainly no city dollars to put towards it. So my recommendation would be to shelve it. The comment about the art was that there was some talk about wanting to paint the Jersey barriers and things like that. And my recommendation was that there's no way they can do that without authorization through council and planning or arts commission. So that's where that message was. I forgot to mention that earlier.
Okay, Dan, I saw your hand up.
I was just going to say that I think we have talked about some of these ideas before with the parklets, and I know that Jen took a lot of feedback from council when we had the parklet discussion, and so I don't really see an issue so much with developing the project ideas and the plans, as long as it ultimately comes back to council if there's council decisions to be made about final approval on some of those things. So I know that Jen put in a lot of work. And some of the other staff put in a lot of work to this, but I think there are a lot of good ideas talked about out there. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, considering it's the end of July, we have August next, it'd probably be a little late to put the thing together anyway. So shelving is probably the best course of action right now. And then Jen's drawings can be used for next year. And by that time, we ought to have some maybe funding source or some other things that will go there. Al, did you have another comment?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at, I got some of these pictures, okay, and I still think we need to think about this. They've got all kinds of different things in these pictures. If the pictures are close to real life, then there's some thought that needs to be made to this. Personal opinion, and I want to be involved.
Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was on the downtown, Zoom call as well, and I agree with Dan. We've talked about the parklets already, and we've talked about ideas. In fact, I think it was one of the meetings that we talked about them was the one before this meeting a few weeks ago. But Eileen's concerns and Al's concerns are definitely warranted. I mean, we should have a little bit more input and see if we can work collaboratively. And yeah, we don't have money for a lot for this right now. Yeah, but I know we have talked about it. So yeah.
Okay. All right, with that, and those are the only mentions that I had from city council members for new business. We do have one resident of our community who wanted to talk to the council on the basis of a discussion we had the last time. So Thomas Van Winkle, we have under new business, people are allowed 3 minutes. So we're calling up Thomas Van Winkle for a 3-minute comment.
Good to go, Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, hi. I didn't know it was just 3 minutes. I thought about 8 to 10 minutes is what I originally mentioned when I asked about this, but I'll try to be quick. I'd like to follow up with additional information and ideas about the proposal presented 2 weeks ago about the local Black Lives Matter movement representatives. They did a great and heartfelt job in the presentations, and I hope their concerns are accepted by everyone. There are legitimate racial issues in America that do need to be addressed. It was proposed to have Black Lives Matter painted on the street or on a mural in downtown Pullman. The common concern of several presenters was the phrase associated with the Black Lives Matter Incorporated, which is an organization. They expressed how it would be preferable to somehow disassociate the phrase from the organization for reasons I'll talk about in just a moment. And it was also mentioned that the idea should be from the community where all voices can be heard, and I think that's important. And I want to address why the disassociation from the Black Lives Matter organization is necessary. First, we really don't know that much about who they are, their allies are, their goals and agendas. And I think it's important that we understand who they really are, what they really stand for, and what their goals really are. I won't get into too much about how they were founded, but they are actually a Marxist organization, and they admit that, and they are super versed, quote, in ideological Marxist theories. And cultural Marxism and tactics is deeply embedded in the Black Lives Matter movement. And again, they want to defund the police, abolish prisons, replace our criminal justice system with a Marxist social justice law, end free markets, capitalism. They want a collective ownership, demand reparations, disrupting the America or the Western family. They say it's oppressive and racist. And they want to replace the institutions of white Western European society. And it goes on and on and on. And you can just look at their allies, get online, look at the BLM leaders, what they say about threatening to burn the system down if they don't get their ways. And one of the things I had to ask, what do people think of when they hear the phrase Black Lives Matter? And it's somewhat interesting. I talked to some people here in Pullman and they didn't want their names used, and I asked why. Well, they said fear of reprisals. Anyway, here's some examples: need for social justice, police brutality, racist cops, racism, looting, riots, violence, cop killers. We're mentioning the Dallas 2015 when 12 cops were shot and 5 were killed. And some of the chants that we want dead cops now, fry them like bacon.
We're at 3 minutes.
Mark's
Thomas, we're at 3 minutes.
Anyway,
Can you just wrap it up?
okay, so what I want to say here is to have the city of Pullman sanction that phrase to be painted on our streets would show that the city approves of, endorses, and agrees with, and condones the BLM platform, methods, and tactics. And I think we need community input on that. But I do have a really good proposal. Under your leadership, Mr. Mayor, in 2017, you got the welcoming city resolution, and then the following year, the Wayside Welcome, where we depicted signs of welcome for more than 60 languages. And also the Wazoo has a welcoming message where they want a climate that enables underprivileged, underrepresented students, faculty, etc., to be able to thrive. And the university just repledged its commitment. So, and on legitimate police reform, we know Gary Jenkins is way ahead of the curve. So when it comes to creating a message for our community, I think, as you mentioned, we want to get creative, and here's an example. We value all lives. We, meaning the community, send this uniting, inclusive, and uplifting message to all people of all races everywhere. Pullman is welcoming, and you are valued no matter who you are or where you are from, Asia, Africa, etc. We include and respect everyone. You matter. This is a safe haven. This message could also apply to potential students, that this community cares and everyone matters. This can be home. You are welcome here. We value all lives. You are welcome here. And I think a phrase or something like that, I think would show something where a little bit more universal message that all people deserve the love, respect, inclusion, and welcome togetherness, and reaffirming our ideals to work for equality for all, equal justice for all, and strive to make Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of a colorblind society, racial harmony, and the promotion of goodness and trust a reality. I think we need to open this to a public conversation and hear what the people have to say. And I don't think the choices can be more clear. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the council, for listening.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay. With that, that's the last of the new business. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we're adjourned.